Welcome to Yelling Into the Void, a podcast discussing and exploring topics in World of Warcraft. I'm Tevin. I'm joined by Scott.
Hello.
And guys, Scott was doing a little bit of thinking today, or
Oh,
maybe
no.
it was because he watched the Pod EC and it was on there. I'm not 100% sure, but either way, Scott, you wanna tell the listeners what you've come to realize today?
Yeah, it was the Potty C. They were talking about how time trials for TGP starts on January 22nd. So that means, if we do some just quick mental math here, that means that that'll run for a week and then conclude on January 29th, which means if there is a typical weekend break between the end of time trials and the beginning of the tournament, that means that the Group A will play on the 7th, Group B will play on the 14th, the Group C, which is typically the China group, will play on the 21st. And that means that the conclusion of the TGP will happen on the 2nd of March, which means that we were wrong when we estimated a February release date for patch 11.1. They cannot do a patch release date in the middle of a tournament for the previous season, and they will not be doing that, which means best case for patch 11.1 at this point is March 4th. I think that's actually ambitious. I don't think it's going to be March 4th. I'm guessing either the 11th or the 18th. Which is a little longer than we expected. But really, the thing that really rocked my world here when I was thinking about this was this season started on September 10th. So if the season ended on March 11th and the new season started on the 18th, that would be our 6-month season period. But if you think about that, that means that today, as we're recording this, is December 10th. That means we have just reached 3 months since season 1 of The War Within began, which means that this season is, as of today, if all these dates are true, only half over. We're only halfway.
Maybe half over time-wise, but I think that the majority of the community is pretty well done with this season.
Remember when we did our season 1 retrospective last week?
Yeah, before the halfway point of the season.
Uh-oh. I mean, it's funny because, we said February. We said end of February, and we were wrong, but not by a significant margin, just by a little bit. But I hadn't done the math or contemplated this idea that what that means essentially is the season is only half over. I recognize the amount of time till the next season, but that didn't compute in my head. That means that amount of time we've only gone through so far in the season, and it feels like the season's been dead for a month.
Yeah, and there's definitely a little bit more that I want to talk about with this, because there is some other realizations that we came to.
Yeah.
And it's, I don't know. I try to stay positive with a lot of things with this game, but it's, lack of better terms, depressing. It's straight up sad that we are still 3 months away from potentially being done with this first season and seeing fresh content in the game. And before you come at me with your pitchforks, yes, I know 1107 drops next week. Yes, I know that brings a new zone. Yes, I know that brings a new ring. That's technically new content, but come on, let's be real here. Everybody's talking about the raid in the dungeons when they talk about new content.
I would be shocked if someone comes at you and says, no, there's plenty of content. Just look at 11.0.7 and our new incredible 6-week ring. It's going to be great.
Yeah, 6 week. Also, did we even think about that? If it was 6 weeks and we were predicting the end of February, it would be, you would get your ring and then the patch would be over and we'd be in 11.2, essentially.
That's true.
We didn't even think about that.
Wait.
Maybe our prediction was bad.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Well, not quite. I mean, that would 6 weeks from the patch sees us to the end of January, so we would, in theory, have a whole month with our ring. Now we have a month and a half. Hooray.
Our ring that's going to be so good, which we'll talk about a little bit more as well, because Wowhead did a post on this, and yeah, shockingly, I think Scott and I were right in the same ballpark that we were with the amulet on this garbage. So, yeah.
So, I think one thing we'll say as we get into this episode is that we've always had these times in this game where The season was kind of dying. We're at a lull in the game. We're playing other things. There's not a lot to talk about. This has always happened to us. Um, we've never had a podcast while this was happening to us. And
Yep.
so we find ourselves in this really weird place where we're like, what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about some stuff. We got some stuff to talk about, but we are definitely scraping the very, very bottom of a not very big barrel.
Yeah, it's really rough when Wowhead, the main source of WoW news, still doesn't come out with any articles of like meaningful substance. Like you look at the articles that they post, and like Tuesday's the big news day for WoW, right? It's
Mhm.
patch day. It's when all of the news typically drops. And you look at the articles that were posted today, and it's like a couple paragraphs about how the annulet's garbage, a couple paragraphs about patch notes, a couple paragraphs about classic. Like it's it's pretty sad.
They released 2 articles about player housing, a thing that we at this point know absolutely nothing about.
Yep.
There are 2 articles.
But anyway, so let's talk about the news because, like I said, there's not been a ton, but there has been some stuff, and I think people might actually care about this a little bit. Some mythic nerfs have happened to Silken Court, and it seems like fairly significant
Yeah.
mythic nerfs, maybe. And the thing that's weird to me about this is it looks like they have like reduced target counts for things, which is always a very significant nerf, right? Like that reduces your coordination by a ton,
Yeah.
but they actually increase the damage it does. So I think that this means that you're still going to have essentially the same amount of pressure on you with just less coordination.
Yeah, I mean, I think Silken Court is unique in that it's not the type of boss that like scaling buff from the zone or better gear will overcome the challenge for you. It's a dance. It's a very specific dance that if one person messes up, everyone wipes. And so, I mean, we were literally at the case where there were more guilds that had completed Ansarek on Mythic than were currently trying to progress on Silken Court. So this really weird, like where was this definite bottleneck where like even Ansarek after all the nerfs is now kind of easier than this boss. And
Yep.
yeah, the buff wasn't doing anything to solve that. So this I think is a very targeted specific to that coordination challenge and should hopefully help with that bottleneck, which I mean is good, I guess. I still struggle, and I know we've talked about this before, but I still struggle with like from a design perspective if this is just the best way to run this game, right? Where we just make these bosses with these impossibly difficult bosses, and then the only way we can get a decent amount of people clearing them is by just steadily nerfing them over time. And like I guess I would prefer a world in which just more gear and more damage is what eventually allows the less skilled players to overcome these challenges, and it's not just wait around until you get the nerf that gets you from not being able to kill it to able to kill it. Like this, I feel like there's just different tiers of mythic raiders that are just waiting till the boss gets to their specific level of ability to overcome, and that I don't like it. I don't like it.
Yeah, and it's kind of bad in the sense too where like the hardest part of Mythic is getting a roster.
Yeah.
And when you get stonewalled on a boss, people stop playing the game, which means then you're having to rebuild your roster, which means you're then having to reprog on bosses that you've already killed, let alone the boss that you haven't killed yet. And so I think that this is a very toxic way to go about it for people who are trying to build raid teams. I think that it
Yeah.
is very negative when it comes to trying to maintain a consistent roster and keep people engaged and wanting to continue to do things.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've seen a lot of guilds collapse this season, and not surprising because of stuff like this for sure. Like even some like high profile players are in guilds that just have fallen apart because of
Mhm.
inability to prog, and it's a bummer. It really is. I wish there was a better way to do this. I'm not sure I have the answers, but it just doesn't seem like this is necessarily working.
Yeah, and it's kind of wild too because like Ansarek was hard and then they nerfed it to be like reasonable,
Hmm.
I guess is the right way. But they still left the other 3 like walls in the raid. Like
Yeah.
Ovanax is still there, Princess is still there, and Silken Cord's still there. And they really fundamentally didn't change any of those bosses. And so like they were still really big brick walls for people. And I think that the fact that like even if you got through Princess or even if you got through Ovanax, you know that you still have the other one and then Silken Court to get through to even get to the final boss,
Yeah.
which is a pretty big mental drain.
Yeah, I agree. I don't. It's frustrating. I feel like it feels weird to just say the game is too hard, but because I don't know if I actually believe that, but I just think like the way that they've designed how the difficulty curve works is not good design.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I feel like this season 1 has been like the season of brick walls, like level 12 wall in Mythic Plus, and then these like 3 bosses have just been big stone walls for people as well.
Yeah.
I'm hopeful that we'll see changes going into season 2. I was hopeful we would hear about some changes for Mythic Plus maybe today, but we didn't. Maybe that'll be coming in the couple weeks. Um, Anyways, Scott, is there anything else for the raid that you want to touch on?
No.
Okay, there's a couple of other things for retail that have came in. That okay, we've got to talk about this one, and I don't even know like really what to say about it because like it, it's more of an annoyance to me than anything. But crests were uncapped this week, and like not only is it too late in the season to be doing this, which like funnily enough is it though, because it's the midway point. If this is actually what they think the middle of the season is going to be, like this makes sense for them to be doing this now. But also we have enough crests to upgrade all of our gear. The limit to crests is essentially non-existent already anyways.
Yeah.
So it's really frustrating to me that this is being done now and nothing else is being brought in with it. Like if this came along with like a increase in the amount of crests that you get for dungeons or something like that, it would make a lot more sense to me. But it's not. It's just the removal of the cap.
Yeah. So my theory on this is that this was just a pre-coded thing that like they just coded into the game once crests got to X cap, it was just going to clear it. And this was nothing that anyone manually did or put in this week at all. And that's why it didn't come with anything else. Look, this might be me just really, really trying to believe in hope in the future and change type thing. But that's what I think. I think that anything that is going to come like a change to crest system, like or increase crests mid-season, whatever, I feel like that comes in a patch, not just a weekly maintenance. So, I mean, I really, there was a part of me that was, as we were like gearing up to record this podcast today, I was like, it's okay. Cause any minute now they're going to release some news
Nope.
that hey, some important announcements for 1007 or 1107 along with the new island. We're going to increase yada yada yada, basically everything we and everyone else has been complaining about for the past few months. I just was kind of hoping that would happen. I think this is like one of those things where yes, I think it was pre-coded into the season before it started, and it looks bad because it looks like, oh, everyone's complaining about this thing and you didn't address our concern at all. Instead, you just turned off one thing that essentially does nothing. It's like, well,
Sure.
I don't think they turned it off. I think it's just an unfortunate coincidence.
Yeah.
But I do, man, I mean, you said it that hopefully we're going to get some news in a couple weeks. I mean, I think when 1107 drops next week, that means the 11.1 build will probably hit the PTR within a couple weeks of that, and hopefully when that build first hits the PTR is when they will start talking about what actual changes for the systems in 11.1 are going to be, if any. And so I hope that's when we actually hear news about this. But I don't know. There is part of me that just wonders, are they just kind of going to let the game bleed out for the next few months and hope that everyone will come back when the new patch drops?
Yeah, I'm a little bit concerned that that's what's going to happen. Mainly because, and this is potentially me being a bad podcaster slash reporter, but I don't remember what really happens news wise around the holiday season. And as somebody who works in like a corporate tech industry already, like the end of this week, or let's be generous and say the end of next week is when people are going to go on holiday. and they're
Mhm.
not going to come back until after the new year, which means I have low hopes that we're going to get anything until January if we don't get it a week from today.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I'm working through the end of next week, and then I'm not technically off, but we're working from home from then on out, and things are shutting down pretty hardcore. So I I would be shocked if we see a lot of stuff happening over the next 2 weeks. So yeah, it's. I mean, and again, like we're gonna get through the holidays, we're gonna start the new year. The game is retail is essentially a ghost town. Like I don't know if you've been. We talked about last week that those mythic runs per week graphs are not like argumentative in of themselves, but the number of runs a week is rapidly approaching season 2 Dragonflight numbers, and it's going to get there pretty soon. And we still have half a season left. So eh, yeah, it's not good. It feels like there's something that needs to be done. Like there's the changes that I think need to happen broadly that we've talked about before, but I do think there needs to be some sort of triage to stop the bleeding here over the next few weeks to just limp us along into season 2. I don't know if they're going to do that or not though. So we'll
Well,
see.
to be clear, 1107 is not it.
No,
Like
absolutely
that
not.
is not going to do it.
No, that's not going to do. No, no. It's 1107, it could be. I haven't messed around with it all. I haven't really read much. It could be great content for the people that are still actively logging into the game that just want stuff to do. They want to go to this island. They want to do stuff. They want to just advance in some way. Great. Nothing wrong with that at all. But no, I do not think this is going to be a patch that addresses any of the core concerns around some of the systems that it seems like everyone's been talking about lately. So no, not definitely not.
Yeah, which is my main concern. But all of this aside, 1107 is dropping a week from today,
Mm-hmm.
which today is Tuesday for you and I. You guys will be hearing this on Wednesday. So, what day is that? Let me look. The 17th of
Correct.
December, 1107 will be dropping. So that's a week away. And if you've been living under a rock or haven't listened to the past couple of podcasts, this is bringing with it a ring similar to the amulet that was in Dragonflight. Um, More targeted, I guess. We can talk about that in a little bit. It brings a new zone, the Siren Isles. It brings a few new factions, which means we're going to also get cosmetics and other things that we can do with those factions. Um, and there's a few other things, like there's a special assignment that's coming.
Which is, I mean,
But
that's just a world event that's going to be attached
yeah,
to the new zone, right? Like, that's
yeah,
nothing. Yeah.
it's going to be the same thing that we have in the current zones,
Yeah.
but there's going to be one for that zone
They
specifically.
they
I don't.
they put that in like the little graphic they put together for new stuff, like new special assignment. And I'm like, no one is going to look at that and be like, "Oh, no way. New special. I can't wait."
Is there a world boss with this zone?
I believe there is. I think the way this works is you basically ally with one of the three factions once a week, and then there is a specific world boss for each of the three factions. So you can only kill one per week based on who you allied with, and I think
Gotcha.
so. Yeah.
Gotcha. Well, anyways, all of that is coming on Tuesday. And if you are still playing the game, hopefully that is a good update for the people who are playing. Um, that being said, maybe this is where we talk about it a little bit. Wowhead did do an article on this ring, and it's looking very similar to what the amulet was on release, which is weak. It looks like uh, the best things that you can target, because for some reason the amulet you couldn't actually target the things that you wanted. They are allowing you to target the things that you want for this ring because it is time gated. You have to go through 6 weeks and then you will eventually get everything that you can slot into this ring. But you can actually target the things that you want this time, and it's looking like the things that people are going to want are going to be the things that give secondary stats, because by default this ring doesn't give secondary stats, which I've always been a very big advocate to say, like, jewelry and trinkets need to have secondaries or primary stat, or people are not going to use them. There's so many trinkets in the game currently that have really cool effects but will never get used because they don't have primary stat or they don't have a secondary stat. And jewelry only has secondaries. Like
Yeah.
if you make a necklace or if you make a ring and it doesn't have secondary stats on it, there is absolutely no way in fucking hell anybody is going to use that over something that is going to give them 2000 of a secondary stat.
Well, I mean, let's be clear. They will if something like Wowhead tells them it's better, but it's not going to feel good. Like, I mean, that's like if you're a class that really, really likes haste and you're getting just a shit ton of haste out of your jewelry slots, and then you have to drop 2000 haste rating to get this ring, even if it like your numbers will be better. Like even if the guides, all the number crunching tells you this is stronger for you than having 2000 haste, it still won't feel that way because that amount of secondary drop will feel noticeable. You will feel your global cooldown be slower, you'll feel your cast time be longer, like you'll feel those things. And yeah, I agree, like it's it is really difficult to I still like follow the guides, and if I'm told this is better for me, I'll wear it, but I do not like it. I do not like the idea of losing stats. Having choices that make me lose any stats. Like it doesn't ever feel good. So they keep trying this, and here we are again, and I don't know if you saw that they hot fixed like all the damage and healing effect ones
Yeah.
yesterday by like a
Yeah.
huge amount, like 40%.
The thing that gets me with the stats on stuff is like the guide writers for Wowhead, bless their hearts, like they are doing this for the masses who play the game, but they don't take into account that even people pushing higher end content are going to be looking at these guides sometimes. And so the thing that stands out to me the most is the Rashanon, or not Rashanon, the Sarkareth cape from last expansion, and everybody suggesting you wear this cape that effectively reduces your health pool by a very significant margin. And then you go into Mythic Plus and you're like, why am I getting one shot by this mechanic? Oh, well, it's because I'm wearing this cape that has no stamina on
Yeah,
it.
yeah, that should be said that
And
the cape just had 0 stamina on it, and
yeah,
that's a
so
huge
it's
amount of HP loss, yeah.
things like that are concerning to me because like numbers wise this might be better, but that doesn't mean that it's better for end game content,
Yeah.
or it doesn't mean that it's better for newer players. Like there is nuance to this, and that's the biggest problem with Sims is like just going by the numbers isn't always necessarily correct.
Yeah, well,
uh,
and things like these citrines, these gems that you attach to this ring. This is one thing that sometimes this game does that really bothers me, which is like you try to imagine being like a normal player, like a normal person playing this game that isn't you or me, or isn't a person that's going to immediately turn to Wowhead and be told what's the best. Like, how
mhm.
would you, a normal player, look at these things and go, okay, um, which one's the best though? They're just like really like it's really hard to just tell just by these. I think cantrip effects are cool. I like things that have cantrip effects on them, but again, to your point, when the cantrip effect is the main reason you have the thing and not just, oh, here's a ring with stats on it, but here's a bonus effect, an over budgeted bonus effect is that it also has a cantrip on it, then you can be pretty confident, be like, oh, this is good and it has a little bonus effect. When the cantrips are the entire thing, just the whole thing, then the game is asking you to make a lot of choices that aren't clear, I think.
I think that those players would likely pick the things that have fun stuff on them because they're likely not caring too much about min maxing,
Sure.
which means they probably don't know the value of secondary stats.
Right.
Um, and so, yeah, I don't know. That's just me going off the cuff, but I imagine that they'll pick the one that sounds the most fun, not necessarily the one that's the best for them.
Yeah, I mean, frankly, I don't understand how people play this game without like researching stuff on their own in the first place. Like, how do you even know you pick a spec? Like, how do you know which stats are you want?
Yeah,
like how do you know? I guess you could crunch your own numbers, but how do you know? Like, oh, haste performs better than crit for me. A lot of that stuff's not transparent. Like you can't like look at your talent build and just kind of instinctively know, oh, it seems like based on these talents and these abilities that haste would be a really good stat for me. I mean maybe some you can, like I think feel like with Resto Druid, if you like know that haste makes your hots tick faster, you could probably make the mental leap that it seems like haste is gonna be really good for me. But I feel like the game as it is right now, just you have to play this way. almost. And so maybe even the people that I'm imagining here don't exist. That anyone that's going to get this ring is just going to have a guide that tells them which stones to put in it.
Yeah, I mean, theory crafters do amazing work, and
Yeah, for sure.
I appreciate them wholeheartedly, but it does bring up a good point. It's the same thing, like, there are a lot of things that we solve with add-ons in this game, right? And, like, without the add-ons, how do you play the game? And obviously people do it. Like, there is a community who does this stuff. There is a community that doesn't really care about the numbers and optimizing and everything like that.
Yeah.
But I feel like there are things that need to happen clarity wise. Um, yeah, I don't know how they solve this, right? Because this is so ingrained in how the game is nowadays. But you make a good point. I don't know how you play the game without add-ons. I don't know how you play the game without guides. It's not something I could do.
Yeah. Definitely not.
Um, let's see what else. Oh, Wowhead did a little bit of an introspective on player housing and garrisons, which is something that you brought up. I think this is an interesting question. It was something that I wanted to do a whole section on, but man, it's just not enough. Like, we don't have enough information to really talk about it. And I don't think that either one of us are so deeply ingrained in this that we really care all of that much. Like, player housing's cool. I'll probably interact with it, but like, I just don't know that it's something that I have enough drive to really dig into a ton. But the question that they posed is interesting to me, uh, and it's that garrisons gave too much to the player. They gave you an auction house. They gave you all of the things that you needed to do for professions. They gave you the war table to make a bunch of money. They gave you vendors and everything else. What is too far for player housing? Because one of the things that they brought up, and I think would be super cool and not necessarily take away from the social aspect, is like, what if we had like a configurable portal room in our house where we could have portals to zones that we wanted to go to? Is that too much?
Yes. I have no idea. I don't know.
um,
Yeah, I mean, this is a tough question to answer, and I don't know if I have an answer for you. I mean, my thing with the player housing is essentially, and I think part of the reason why we chose not to dive into this into a super amount of detail yet is just because they've given us absolutely zero specifics. So everything is just speculating. And I mean, I think it's fine to speculate and look at garrisons and be like, what lesson did we learn from this and that kind of thing. But until like we have any kind of idea on what their vision for this thing even looks like, um, there's just not much we can truly say about it.
yeah, and I want to be clear. I think that the main thing driving a lot of the hesitation around player housing is the fact that garrisons were implemented so poorly and really did kill the community and the aspect of like, this is an online game at the time.
Sure.
But that being said, we have had years of iteration on this game at this point, and I think that the main city, depending on what shard you're in, because sharding wasn't as big of a deal back then, still feels kind of empty. I'm not sure that this is going to have the same negative effect that it did before, even if they just did rerun garrisons again.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just kind of what, and we've sort of talked about this before, but what value do you place in the idea of when I'm in Dornegal, I can see other people standing around AFK in Dornegal? And does that like, look, I think we've been talking about Classic a lot because of everything going on Hardcore Classic right now. I think certainly there is a version of this game that is a really great accomplishment of making it seem like a living breathing world, that you have to traverse the world and yada yada yada. Like, I think all that was very important to the past of WoW, and it's a part of the game that people still want to relive, and that's why Classic is as popular as it is. That is not what retail is anymore. It's just not. The game world is
Mhm.
beautiful. It's fun to explore it still at first, but that's not how anyone really interfaces with World of Warcraft anymore. So like, is it okay that you just hang out in your own personal hub versus hang out in the big hub? I,
Right.
like I there's never there's never a moment where I log into this game and go, "Oh, I'm so glad that I see all these random people." It makes me feel so happy that I know other people play this game. Like that's just not the type of game World of Warcraft is anymore. And like especially with the existence of Classic as an outlet for the people that really really treasure that kind of stuff. Like I just don't even think it needs to be that kind of game anymore. So yeah, I
Hmm.
mean maybe just going full garrison mode where you're just hanging out in your house and that's it. Maybe that's okay. I don't know. I don't know.
I don't see him going back and doing that again. I think that they think that that was a huge mistake and it killed the player base at the time. But I don't know. We'll see. Like as Scott said, we have no information on this now. This is all just speculation. And at this point, it's fun to talk about, but there's really no substance in saying anything around it because again, the most information we have is that there is going to be more styles than just the human style housing. Like
Yep.
that is like the most information we have been given about player housing. We
Yep.
haven't been told how we're going to decorate, how we're going to get the things to decorate, what if it's going to be like a war band house or if each character is going to have their own house. Like none of that information. So, yeah, like I said, at this point, it's all just speculation. And sure, maybe we'll talk about it from time to time, but I don't think it's something that we have much more to say on
I think
this.
once they release their like preview or something, it'd be a fun thing to revisit and talk about. But yeah, we have nothing. And I don't think
Yeah.
we're gonna have anything for quite a while.
Yeah. So, Scott, there is one final thing, and we're technically still in the news section because there's really only like one main thing I want to talk about today. So,
Yeah.
like, we have been stretching this out a little bit, but um, you've been doing some lower keys because you've been playing a lower character.
Mm-hmm.
And watching you in this endeavor the other day, it almost seems like the twos and fours that you're doing are harder than the 12s that we did a couple weeks ago. Like it's a little bit insane to see how much the community has spread out at this point. And like there's still keys happening at the low levels, but there isn't players to really carry the people who should be in twos
Yeah.
higher than that. And so now it's all of the people who should be in twos or maybe shouldn't be in twos at all uh, that are left. And it's causing some real issues, I think.
Yeah, it's rough out there, y'all. I mean, it's like playing a healer also is illuminating in a way that playing a tank isn't because in tank you're mostly concerned with yourself and keeping yourself alive. You're not necessarily paying attention to what the rest of the group is doing. But as a healer you have to. And so you're just seeing every single mistake every single person makes constantly and having to deal with that. And yeah, it's fours are hard for me right now. Well, I mean, it's not like it's hard for me. Like the mechanics are not hard. It's just like there's just it's hard knowing that there's really nothing you can do at a certain point. Like, it's I think it is really interesting because like obviously not a lot of people are playing this game right now. I think the people that are playing this game have reached the end of a progress path and are probably not that interested in doing alts. But if they are, like that's the weird thing about twos and fours. I didn't really want to do any of the delve shit, so I just dove into Mythic Plus instead. And everyone that's like a min maxy player is doing delves until they're 6 or something and then just jumping right into sixes. So the
Yep.
people that are queuing for like twos through fours and fives are not the best. And look, I don't want to like everyone has a different skill level in this game. Everyone's at a different place. People are learning. I encourage all of that. But holy shit, it is rough out there. I did some keys over the past few days that just made me want to pull my hair out and like and I'm bald. So let me tell you what that means. Um it's just like a lot of people that just don't understand how anything works. Like I had a tank in Mr. Tuna Scythe last night who let every single patty cake go through. Um, and I think they ended up interrupting one, and it was a paladin. And I think it was literally just because they threw their shield. I don't think they were throwing their shield to interrupt. I just think they got a proc and used their shield just during the cast time, and it just happened to interrupt it. But like just people getting hit by stuff, people standing and stuff, people not understanding mechanics, people not helping with the affixes at all. Like this past week we had the dispel slash heal affix, and like nobody was doing it. Like nobody. Like I was in a group where every single person had a self dispel where they could just deal with their own. They were not. I was having to dispel one person and heal everyone up every single time. And
Mhm.
like it's just kind of crazy. Like I first of all, I didn't pug a lot this season until now, so maybe this has like always been true all season long, and I was just blissfully ignorant of it because I was playing with a group of people that are pretty good, at least know what they're doing. It's rough, man. I've never been more sympathetic to people than I am now. um like at the beginning of the week there was a guy who we did like the first pull in a City of Threads for, and he was doing good DPS, but the other two DPS weren't. And like we hadn't even wiped or anything. We got to the first boss and he was just like, nah, too low DPS. I'm out. And like I messaged that guy being like, dude, what the fuck are you doing? Like it's a 4. We'd be fine. That was me at the beginning of this week. At the end of this week, I was like, yeah, I get it. I get it now. I'm totally with you.
Yeah, the thing is like it's hard, right? Because like you were saying, people have different skill levels, and that's the reason we have this infinitely scaling system in Mythic Plus. Like
Yeah,
it will naturally filter people to the level that they need to be at. And so it's rough to be upset at somebody at that level. And I hope that people aren't upset with people at that level. It's fine to be annoyed if you if you are annoyed, but don't go out of your way to make somebody's day worse because of that.
sure.
Um, but yeah, I don't know. It's really weird to see. It's really weird to see us go from being able to easily plus three a two with like a ton of minutes left on the plus three timer to seeing people struggle to even time a two. Um, I haven't really been interacting with it, but I have been watching Scott do some of these dungeons, and it's just wild. It's
Yeah.
really crazy to see. And I don't know if it's because people are doing things just way under geared for what they should be doing. I don't know if it's really just coming down to people don't know the dungeons. Um, but yeah, it's crazy. And in all of my pugging this season, I haven't quite had that experience. I've had some bad groups, but I haven't had not timing it too kind of groups.
It's really rough because like on the one hand I'm sympathetic. Like that guy I messaged that left the key at the beginning of the week, I was like, dude, it's a 2 to 4. Like this for learning. Like this is what people are doing now. They're learning. And he goes,
Yeah.
nah, if you want to learn, do normals or heroics. And my response to that is like, no, that like shit
They don't
in
have mechanics.
yeah, shit in that stuff dies too fast. Like you're not going to actually learn anything. Everything dies too fast. It has less mechanics than you'll see in Mythic Plus. Like heroic and M0 is actually a terrible way to learn what you need for Mythic Plus. So like the only way you learn is by going through these keys and doing these keys, and like me sitting on one side of it that I'm really just trying to get my character geared up and just move up the ladder as quickly as possible, and I don't want to waste my time untiming a 2. um like that, I am frustrated, but I am also trying to be understanding of where people are at because
Mhm.
they're not at the same level I am. And that, I mean, that is one thing that I think is great about this game, is that it brings people of all different skill levels and goals together, but it also can lead to friction and frustration because yeah, you have the people in there that this is their first Mythic Plus ever, and they're afraid of telling you that because
Yeah.
they they know what the reaction to that will be. Like I think that tank in Mistatina Scythe, like very possibly could have been the first dungeon he ever tanked, and
Mhm.
that's rough. It's rough. Like nothing in the game tells you, oh, this ability patty cake. You have to kick it, and only you can kick it. By the way, nobody else can kick this ability. It's like one of the only thing moments in the game where like it's a spell that you yourself have to kick, and you only learn that by having it happen to you. And yes, okay, we told him after the first time, and he continued to not do it. But like, I don't know, like shit happens.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. All of this to say though, it's just a little bit crazy. I mean, that's the only reason we really wanted to call it out.
Yeah.
It's not really to throw shade on anybody. It's not to really complain. It's just it's wild. It's wild to see how the season kind of like as it gets going, like I said, it's almost like this natural filter. Like, it's the reason that we have the infinitely scaling system. It will drop people where they belong, and that will be the majority of the players at those key levels. And so it's just wild to see now that people are already outscaling this and people aren't really coming back to do these lower level content, that it is actively hard to get a good understanding of, the dungeons or
Yeah.
anything like that, because you are playing with people who are learning. And it's just something people need to be mindful of too. Like, I don't know, my general rule of thumb in life, not just this game, is like, don't be fucking rude. So
Yeah.
yeah, just have some understanding, I guess, is all I have to say.
Yeah, no, for sure, for sure. And that was a challenge for me this week, for sure. The only people I'm actually tend to be rude to are the people that are being rude to others. Like the only like
Exactly.
I've never whispered someone and been like, "Hey, you suck." I whispered the guy who left because I thought that was a really shitty thing to do. Is like leave the key just because people are doing low DPS. Like I honestly, I still think we would have timed that dungeon just fine.
Mhm.
But like so that was frustrating. But you know,
It is what it is.
yeah.
All right. I don't have anything else on the news docket. Anything else you want to cover?
No, I just want to say props to us for it's doing making that 40 minutes long. There's no news.
So Scott, the main thing I want to talk about, I've already brought this up to you, so this should be no shock to you,
Mhm.
but the biggest thing is, and we've talked about a couple of these things in the past, player retention systems in World of Warcraft. And man, I don't really even know where to begin, because I think the easiest place to begin is the most recent example of player retention systems, which is going to be like crests and stuff like that, weekly
Yeah.
caps. But there's so much more to this. Like, it was Azerite power and artifact power and all of this other stuff before. We've always had lockouts, which is a way of player retention because you can't just spam a raid over and over again. And so I guess the question that I have, and the question that I want to talk about, is, are these systems working? Are they good for the game? So I guess let's start with our player retention systems as they currently are in the game. So let's think of like crests, crest caps, lockouts, weekly vault, all of that stuff. Do you think that that is actively retaining players, or do you think that that's pushing people away right now?
Yeah, this is a really interesting topic because I think a lot of I think there are two different ways we can look at these kind of retention systems. So like there's player retention that is kind of I think the crests are a great example of, you know, uh, gated, but you will eventually get your reward kind of player retention, right? Like you just do this for this many weeks and you'll get there. I think randomness in this game is another form of player retention, right? Like
Yep.
random loot from bosses, that kind of thing. Randomness is player retention. And one of the interesting things that we're seeing in World of Warcraft, not completely, but a lot of what we're seeing is I think a shift away from the using of randomness to retain people and moving more towards this this kind of set. I don't know why the word itself is not coming to mind right now, but um it is this kind of bad luck protection system of get enough of X and you will get something. Not denar, but that's essentially what the crest system is, right? It's not random. It's you get X number of crests, you will get X number of crests for this run, or a little bit less if you fail to time it. But that is a system meant to retain you. That you get a certain number of them per week. You know how many it's going to be, and I guess the thing I'm thinking about a lot, and the thing that I was thinking about when you brought this up was, is randomness a better retention method than this thing we have right now? Because the thing I was thinking about, right? So the thing I was thinking about was, if you want to start an alt right now and gear them up to about the level of what your main is, like 3 or 640, 650, 630 something, 634, I think is 635 ish. If you want to do that, you're going to have to run about 90 dungeons, 90 Mythic
Mhm.
Plus dungeons to get all the crests you need. 90, 95.
8 pluses.
Yeah. Yeah, correct. And the thing I was thinking about with this was, well, how often in World of Warcraft has it been true that you're going to have to do a shit ton of dungeons in order to get all your best gear? Because, like, I think pretty often is the case.
Yep.
Like I think in the existence of this game, it's always been, if you want the best gear, you're going to have to run a lot of shit. You're going to have to do it a lot. But I think the idea, or as it used to be, was like, this cool trinket that you want doesn't drop every time, so you're going to have to run that dungeon a lot of times until you get the trinket to drop. And now with the crest system, that's not why we're having to run the dungeons a lot. Like, it's funny, in our you need 90 crests or 90 runs to get all the crests you need to get all the gear you need. We have not calculated into that uh equation getting the gear at all. We haven't, because we're running with the general assumption that over the course of doing those 90 dungeons you'll probably get all the gear you need,
Yep.
but that's not a sure thing either. And so what I'm wondering is if, like, randomness as a retention metric is actually better psychologically for us humans, because I might have to do 90 runs to get that trinket, but maybe I'll get it in 5, versus the cold hard truth staring down our face when we look at the number of crests we need, and we know for a fact it's going to be 90 runs. We know it's going to be 90 runs. There's never a dopamine moment of like, oh my god, it dropped. There's never a surprise moment. It's, you're going to do this and you're going to do it 93 times exactly, and then you will have enough crests. And it's so funny because I'm contradicting everything I thought I believed in, that, like, I want bad luck protection. I don't want things fully random because randomness is unfair. And I want to have a system that eventually rewards me if I do something enough times. But maybe, maybe we've gone too far in that direction. And part of the reason is not just the number of crests we're getting per run, but just the fact that that mountain is so clearly defined versus the random number generator mountain could be taller, but it could be a lot shorter, and we don't know what that looks like until we're on the climb.
Yeah, so here's the thing I would say. I think that randomness to get a piece of gear is a better system than what we currently have with crests. That being said, randomness to get a piece of gear with a specific stat on it, so Titan forging is a good example, I think is worse than what we currently have.
Yeah,
Um,
I would agree with that. I think they took the randomness factor too far in one, like, I think they took it too far and people didn't like it, and so they scaled back on it. And I think in an attempt to, like, appease what people were asking for, we've moved further in this direction. This kind of, god, I wish I could remember the term. It's on the tip of my tongue what this type of gearing is called, and I just cannot remember it. um
like deterministic loot.
there you go. Determinism, thank you, there it is. Why couldn't I think of that? um so yeah, I think we've almost gone too far in this direction now, which again
So
is so weird for me to say, because just last week I was advocating for dinars to exist. And so, okay, maybe we should take a step back here and say, like, okay, maybe randomness is a better retention metric than determinism, maybe, but is ultimately that good? It like, you know what I'm saying? Like, so randomness is going to keep players around longer than a deterministic schedule is.
sure.
But is that good game design?
Yeah, well, that's the second question I had. It is the thought that we have for these things a good thing for the game, or the versions of them that we have in the game, are they actually good for the game?
Yeah.
Because when I think of it, right, and what we talked about last week, I think that a dinar system, or a system kind of like Final Fantasy does, where you are guaranteed the one thing that you want after X amount of times of doing something, is very good.
Yes.
I think that the way that we have crests in the game right now, it is somewhat deterministic because you can always craft a piece of gear. But if we're being realistic, right, you still want very specific things to then use those crests on at myth item level, which is you have this randomness. And if you're only doing Mythic Plus, you have one time a week that you could potentially get any of the pieces that you want, which you have an extremely low chance of getting anything that you specifically want. And then you have to spend all of those crests that you spent your time getting to level this thing up. And I think that that is really like the crux of the issue. I think that that's a very negative kind of toxic gameplay loop. But if we had a system kind of like Dinar, where you do something X amount of times and then you're rewarded with exactly what you want, at, let's just say, for the sake of like argument, you just get it at the highest item level. Like, I think that that's fine. And
Yeah.
no, it's not going to keep people around as long as what we currently have. It's not going to keep people around as long as having to grind and grind and grind and grind and grind and hopefully get the one thing that they want.
Yeah.
But I think that it's better for the game. And I think it's okay for people to reach a point of completion on their character. Because if all you do is spend the entire time trying to chase that one piece of gear, it feels bad. Like, we have people who we've played with who like who will run dungeons hundreds of times to try and get a piece of gear. I've done it in the past. I did it for the stupid rage feather in Dragonflight. It's not a fun gameplay loop. It's not something that I enjoy doing.
Yeah.
And that was to the point of like going over my crest cap at the time. Like, I was literally running this dungeon to get something that I could then use all of my crests to upgrade. Eh, I don't know. I think that that's ultimately bad. I don't feel like
Yeah.
that makes for a fun gameplay loop.
I mean, I think one interesting thing to think about here is the fact that we started in on this conversation and we basically said that gear progression, like we talked about the different ways of doing gear progression as retention, but the central truth here is that gear progression in and of itself is a retention metric, right? But like it's not just a retention metric, right? So like this is one of those things that this is an RPG. Getting better gear and kitting your character out, and the journey of gear progression is part of the game. And yes, is it also a retention metric? Yes, it is. It keeps people around longer because that is a core gameplay loop of RPGs, is getting gear. But it is really interesting to think, is there ways of retaining players outside of that general loop? Because I think there are a lot of people that are playing this game now that if something like the tournament realm existed and they could just log into the game, kit themselves out in the best gear and hit dungeons, I think there's a lot of people that would do that. I don't know if I'm one of them. I do like the retention, like I like the progression system in gear. I do like getting new pieces of gear. I like getting stronger and feeling and noticing that strength. I like the dopamine rush when a piece of gear that you're was trying to get drops. Like I think that's exciting and cool, and I don't want them to move away from that system, but like I don't think that in and of itself should be the thing that is being done by design to keep people playing the game and
Yeah.
subbing to the game.
Yeah, I agree. I find it very hard and I'm very sympathetic to the devs on this because I don't think that they're ever going to come to a situation in where everybody feels like that this is right and done correctly. But all of that being said, I think that the way that Blizzard has been going about this and the mentality that they need to keep people subbed at all times always has potentially been negatively impacting some people's experience with the game. And I think that that's something that needs to be looked into. Because we had a comment, for example, we had a comment last week on our video that was, it wasn't even the crests that was stopping them from playing. It's the fact that they know that they have missed out on 3 months worth of vault loot that they are just never going to get the chance to do again. And is it okay to miss out on things? Is that something that's fine? In my opinion, probably, but also it does feel awful knowing you are never going to get that attempt on that stuff again. you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
So I don't know how you fix that.
this has been like this has been a friction point in MMOs since I think this game came out, right? Of just this idea of like we talked about this and we talked about MMOs a few weeks ago of like there was an understanding in these type of games that like every person is not going to get to do everything, and sorry, you're not you don't get to raid. You're not one of those players, and you're just going to look longingly at their cool gear and wish that could be you, and maybe it's going to string you along and have them want to be them, but realistically no. And I think World of Warcraft was always kind of like I don't know if we want to do that kind of game. I think we want to
Yep.
do a game that allows everyone to experience just about everything. And that's why they've created these different difficulty levels to where it's like, yes, killing the boss on LFR is not even remotely the same as killing the boss on Mythic, but they want people to be experiencing everything and they want to encourage people to try out all their different systems. Like they want people to go into Mythic Plus. They do. They want to say to you, player, hey, you should try out Mythic Plus. Because like if you're a Delve player, right? Once you finish Delves, let's say you're at like 606 item level, there's there's nowhere else to go. I mean,
Right.
you could do raid a little bit, I guess, but like if you want to advance up the ladder, like the system's actually kind of nefarious in that the gear you get from delves you upgrade, and then the last two upgrades on your progression path can no longer be done by the crests you get from delves. So it's almost as if saying, where do I get those crests? Have to go here for it. You have to go to this thing and do it. And so like there is not a way of playing this game that is just gearing up through delves. I mean there is, but you stop at a point that feels very unnatural to stop at. It's like they intentionally have two of the upgrades just not on there to make you want, well, I want to complete the number. Maybe I don't want to get better gear, but I want to at least complete the number of the gear I have. And
Yeah.
so you're incentivized to move into these other things. And I mean, that is part of the retention plan that they want you to spread out and try all, like, look at, we have all this stuff for you. We've made this whole world and this world has everything in it. You could do pet battles, you could do PvP, you could do Mythic Plus, you can do delves, you can do raid. Like there's all these different advancement paths for you. And like one person, if you did every single one of those things, yes, maybe you would never run out of things to do. But that is not how people interface with this game at
Yeah.
all.
People have very specific likes in this game, and that's what
Yeah,
they
yeah.
do.
Mhm.
And that's why I think this is such a hard thing to fix. Like I think that if they were to do anything, hopefully it would be something along the lines of what we have suggested in the past couple weeks, in like increasing the amount of crests that alts get and stuff like that. I think that the game for mains right now is the best it's ever been. And I've been saying that for the past couple weeks now. I think that you have to put in the least amount of time that you've ever had to do to maintain your main. I think that the way that the crests grow with you as you continue to play the game every week is good for your main. I think that the gearing system is good for a main, but all of that falls apart when you start a character 4 weeks after this season started, and it all comes crumbling down at that point.
Yep.
And so I don't know how you fix it other than the things that we've already suggested, and I don't know that there is a fix.
Yeah.
Maybe they can do something that would make things a little bit better, but I I guess I want to take a look in the past a little bit, Scott, and kind of think, are we in a better place now than we were before? Because like we are still very much so time gated behind a lot of things in the game now. And we were in the past too, right? Like thinking of like going all the way back to classic, even thinking of like Encourage, like that was time gating, but it was bringing everybody together to accomplish something that didn't have like a this will open after X amount of weeks thing. Like one server could do this faster than another server, right? So I almost wonder if time gating is more of the crux of the issue that makes things feel bad than it actually is the current systems we're interfacing with. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, time gating is such a weird thing because it is almost always frustrating while it's happening, right?
Mhm.
Because if you're a person, this content is new, you want to play it, and you're being told by the game for some arbitrary reason that you can only play a little bit of it. It's we talked about this a couple weeks ago. I think it's like the game is trying to save you from yourself a little bit. But I mean, what it's also doing is try to make people that don't have as much time to play feel like they can hang out in the same room as the people that do nothing but play at all the
Yep.
time, because they're the other people are held back to their level. And I just it's the solution they've gone with, and they've gone with from the very very beginning. They've always had this, and it's always kind of been inelegant, I think. It's never really there's always been friction created by it, and they've kind of just decided that they're okay with the level of friction that it's created.
Yep.
um but it is kind of weird. It's just one of the most it's the least creative way of retention, I think, of just like, well, you can't do that until next month, so better keep your sub up until next month because you can't do it until next month,
Hmm.
which feels weird. Like, and I mean, that's the whole having caps on crests is essentially like, we know everyone would gear in a week if we didn't do that, and then they'd be done with the game, and we don't want that. We for the health of the game, we want to keep people around, and that's like it's it's one thing to say, to go into the greedy business model of it, that like we're doing these things, we're time gating because we want people to stay subs so we can keep getting money each month, which I mean
Yep.
is undoubtedly true, but it's also just from like, this is a multiplayer game, and so the game needs people playing it to function, and so like, I'm not just retaining you to keep your sub money. I'm retaining you so Johnny can play with you. Because if you leave and Johnny doesn't have anyone to play with, he's going to get upset and bored and leave also. So like, it's
Oh,
it's like, it's not just greed, you know what I mean? Like, it's not it's part of it, sure, but it's not just that.
yeah. So, okay. All of this to say is, I don't think Scott and I have a very good solution for a lot of these things. And
Yes, yeah.
honestly, I think that if you ask the community, you could ask 100 different people and get 100 different answers on this. I don't think that it's something that's going to have a one size fits all solution. I think it's something that they're going to have to be creative with, and maybe even not even change at all. Like, for a main, our current system, in my opinion, is the best we've had in a very,
Yeah.
very, very, very long time.
I just realized I didn't actually answer your question about that. um I agree with you. Like, I think the game's in a really good place. Like, despite all of our whining over the past few weeks, I think the game's in a very good place for a main. Like, I have to play the least amount. I like, I have very little time to play this game week to week, and I stayed on pace with everyone that could play all the time, right? So like,
Mhm.
these systems, these time gating things are kind of like for me almost specifically. And so like, I appreciate them. I like the game. I like the design of the game right now. It feels, I like the fact that the gearing processes for mains, it's a little slower than it was in Dragonflight. I think there's probably too many upgrade levels. Like,
Yep.
the myth track having 6 levels feels kind of crazy to me.
Yeah.
But overall, I like it, and I feel like, see, here's the big question I have. If they announce tomorrow that starting next week, alts will get 4 times the amount of crests that they're currently getting right now until they catch up to what the number that their main has gotten, is that going to retain more players? Like, maybe for like a little bit, like maybe some people would come back. Like, if I heard that, I'd probably play a little bit more for a while.
It's funny you ask, because the next thing that I wanted to ask is, I wanted to say that there's another form of player retention that nobody ever seems to talk about, and it's like what I said last week, that it's easier to pick out negatives than it is to pick out positives. But there is a positive form of player retention that Blizzard has been doing a relatively good job about recently, and that is, almost every system that is time gated isn't time gated to the point of like, okay, you did all of this on your main, it took you 6 weeks, and now you start your alt at week 4 and now it's going to take you 6 weeks from the time that you start that to finish it. No, you get those first 4 weeks for free essentially. Like you
Hmm.
get them given to you. And so catch up is a way of player retention. It is a way of making you want to play a character, which means that you're playing their game, which means they're retaining you. And I think that the catch up that they have been doing has been relatively good outside of crests. And I want to say this very genuinely because, like, when I think of things like the Hellman chant in Emirdrasil, for example, right? Like, you did not have to play your alt right at the beginning of Emirdrasil to then be on pace with your main for the Hellman chant on Emirdrasil. Like, you just got on your alt, you played it, you got an increased rate on everything,
Yeah,
and it all just equaled out to once everybody had their Hellman chant on their main, you could then finish that quest in a week. Like you didn't have to do the raid multiple times to finish it like mains did because you just finished it in a week. And I think that this is a super good way to keep people playing the game. It keeps people playing alts. It just sucks that the main gearing system has such friction with this and that it almost incentivizes you to not play your alts because you have such a high barrier to get back to where your main is. But all of the other systems have this awesome catch up mechanic that let you catch up super quickly. And so I think that those are kind of like at conflict with each other. But I do think it's important to call out that catch up is a form of player retention as
it
well.
is. Yeah, yeah. Anything that allows people to feel like they're not missing out on something retains players. I think you're absolutely right. Like the idea that just because I had to go on vacation last week. I mean, in older versions of this game and the games that came before it, like you had to go on vacation or work got busy or life got insane and you missed a week, you were just behind a week
Hmm.
forever. And like that is the type of thing that gets people to go like, well, what's the point even anymore? Like this is by the way why like the classic fresh servers are so popular is because people could go into an existing classic server right now and level to 60 and start through the progression of the raids, but they know they're behind. They
Yep.
know that they're behind everyone else, and just the fact that you can go through a place where you're not behind everyone else motivates people to try it out or to keep playing. So I think you're absolutely correct, and this is why I don't understand why they just haven't introduced that in the crest system as well. Like that
Yep.
seems like one of the most easiest fixes to me. And this is so I want to say something because I've been thinking about this lately. Like I see a lot of people talking about the way this game was before and saying things like there's a lot of people complaining right now, but like a lot of these systems have never been better and or
Hmm.
never been more friendly than they are right now. And I think that's true. I just think sometimes what happens when you introduce something that makes your life easier, but then there's like a glaring choice that you don't include part of it, it makes it worse. Like a great example to me is this Warbound idea, this really excellent idea that it was like the poster selling point for this expansion. We're gonna make everything account bound. It's not going to be bound to your character anymore. Achievements, portals, sometimes even gear. You're gonna be able to trade things between all your characters. This is something that you couldn't do before, and now we're all gonna add it. So in a world where you couldn't do that, where everything was character bound, you're like, oh, this kind of sucks, but this is the only world I live in. Now we live in a world where I can trade currencies back and forth between my alts freely, but not all currencies.
Yep.
And so suddenly the fact that two of our currencies, the biggest ones that we want, flightstones and crests, are the only things that cannot interface with this system, it makes them stick out more. It makes it more noticeable. It's like you're telling me over here we have ice cream, but there's like the two best flavors that I want, I just can't have. And
Yeah.
so that, like, yes, 100%, this is a better system than was in place before this point. But you've taken me halfway to Nirvana and then stop and told me, no, 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 you have to wait a little bit, and that makes it worse, I think.
Yeah, it definitely outlines 100% the issues a lot more and it makes it easier to call out the problems. And ultimately I I struggle because like I kind of get the design decisions and like wanting you to actually progress through your character, but ultimately, I'm gonna be honest with you, I don't fucking get it. Like uh, all of this shit, I think should just be warbound. It's the whole selling point of the expansion. I feel like if they were gonna go big, they should have went big this expansion and then reeled it in later. Um, yeah, it feels odd. It feels really odd.
I know we spent like the past 800 days talking about crests, but like let me just throw another thing at you here. What fucking difference does it make if the 90 crests you get each week come from one character or come from four characters? So like here's a solution that I think would work. You can trade crests amongst all your characters, but one character cannot exceed the crest cap for whatever it is for that week, right? So if I have a crest cap of 180 crests, whatever, right? Like who cares which character I get them from? Like who cares? Like this would not speed up gearing. Like you would not be able to degenerate this by having like 20 alts all feeding crests to one person, because on week 1 that person could only have 90 crests anyway, right? You still have a cap. So what difference does it make which of your characters those crests are coming from if each character is still locked behind a certain crest amount? Like it doesn't matter. It just, who cares which character they're coming from? It doesn't matter.
I almost wonder, would the cap be better not on obtaining but on spending? Like if you could hold an infinite amount of crests from the beginning of the season, but you could only spend 90 a week, would that be better?
Interesting. It might be. I mean, I think I think what it would do is just, it would still cause degenerative behavior of people, that they would just the first week like farm infinite. So I mean, the problem with what you're proposing is, if in a world in which you're trying to keep the I can only log in 2 hours a day, a few days a week, people on the same playing field with the I'm playing 14 hours a day people, like that would, from a eye level perspective, keep them it with parity. But the person that could farm crest degeneratively would just kind of naturally be ahead still.
Yeah.
Um, because they would just like, on Tuesday they would just spend all their crest for the week, and the other person would have to still be going out there and hitting it and making sure they're farming. So I think there's a reason for why it's on the acquisition and not the spending, but I think maybe they should look into it. I don't know.
Well, the other thing that I wanted to talk about, that we haven't really touched on much, is the vault. The vault is another form of player retention in that it does give you an additional look at loot every week.
Mm-hmm.
And the vault is much better than what they had in previous iterations of this, because for those who've been playing long enough, one, there didn't used to be a weekly reward. Like you didn't get anything every week for doing shit. And you do now. And you have since, I want to say BFA. I don't think it was before BFA. I think BFA is where it first was introduced. But all you had in BFA was you got this chest and you opened it and it gave you a random piece of gear. You didn't get to pick anything. It's just, here's a random piece of gear based on the content that you did last week.
Mm-hmm.
Enjoy. And now we have a choice, and we have a choice at which we can like pick 3 different things from a thing that we did last week. Or if you play the game more, you can pick more things. And I think that that's ultimately better, but it does put us in this situation of where if you're not getting a vault every week, then it feels bad, right?
Yeah.
And so I want to say the vault is ultimately good, but it again, it does exactly what you were saying before. The only way for Mythic Plus players to get Mythic pieces is out of the vault, and so that feels bad because they are doing content. Some of them are doing content on parity with the difficulty of Mythic Raid, and they're not getting the rewards from it that you would for doing Mythic Raid. You're getting it once a week, a random chance of 3 pieces to get what you want exactly. And I don't know. I think that it just comes back to exactly what you said, where it is a better system than we had, but it is outlining struggles now as well.
Yeah, I mean, I generally like the vault. I agree with you. It's one of the things that exists in this game right now that does not have a catch up mechanic to it. You, if you miss a vault, you are behind on the vault. And I mean, the kind of built in catch up mechanic is eventually it's going to average out because players that have been getting vault every week are just going to stop getting useful thing in the vaults. That's going to eventually happen. Um, so that is, I guess, sort of its own kind of built in catch up mechanic.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I think it's an interesting place because we have these tokens that exist. If you can't, if you're not getting anything out of your vault, you get these tokens, and the tokens have kind of never been less valuable than they are right now.
True.
So part of this is that the big thing that you would get from the tokens are sockets, but they changed how sockets worked in the War Within, where I think I forgot what it's called, but the item that allows you to get sockets on all your jewelry. In Dragonflight, it was just you could get 3 sockets on your neck. In the War Within, they expanded it to 2 sockets on neck, two on each ring, and so that kind of drastically reduces the amount of sockets you need now. Like it's just head and belt, right? Or
Yep.
I guess wrist. Can you put sockets on wrist? I don't
I
remember.
I don't remember, but it's a lot less because it used to be rings as well.
Right. Yep. So it just makes that less valuable. And also the other big thing that you could spend your things on was you could get an extra spark, which gave you an extra crafted item outside of the crafted items that people get. But crafted items have never been less valuable than they are now since the crafted thing was introduced in Dragonflight. Like in Dragonflight, you would like it was the correct move to craft early and as often as you could, because crafting would save you crests, because crafting a piece cost less crests than it would take to upgrade a piece to that level. Well, that's not the case anymore because crafting a piece costs 90 fucking crests. It's a
Yeah.
lot. So I feel like the tokens have never been less valuable than they are now, which makes the vault inherently feel more bad, because if you get unlucky or something, just you don't see a lot of benefit out of it. But I think the vault is a good system overall. Maybe they could introduce like a reroll mechanic to it with those tokens. Like you
I would like
spend
that.
tokens to reroll your vault. Something like that. I don't know.
Hmm. Yeah, and that would make it feel better too, because it isn't like, oh, I just took tokens, I can't do anything with these.
Hmm.
No, it gives you something to look forward to the next week. Like, oh, I didn't get the piece that I wanted. Oh, but I had to take tokens last week, so I can re-roll it. Um, yeah, I don't know. I think that might be a good system. I don't really know what the drawbacks with that would be. I'm sure
I
that
don't
there
know.
are
I'd
some
have
that we're
to.
not thinking
Yeah,
about.
I'd have to think through it.
But yeah, no, I on the surface, I think that would be a good idea. Being able to re-roll your vault with tokens would be
Mhm.
kind of cool. Um, I think the only thing we haven't talked about as far as like player retention systems, I touched on it a little bit at the very beginning of this, Scott, but lockouts are a form of player retention that
Mhm.
this game has had since its inception,
Yeah.
and they're not going anywhere.
No.
Um, but like the ability to only do a raid once a week has been in this game since it came out. And it it's gotten better because like, you used to only be able to do mythic dungeons and then Mythic Plus was introduced. And now you can spam those mythic dungeons and get even better loot than you would in mythic dungeons. And so I think the lockout system is getting better. The one area with lockouts that I wish Blizzard would really fix is ID lockouts suck. They need to go away. I don't know why they're still in for Mythic. I mean, I know why. The reason is they don't want people buying lockouts for Mythic. They don't want people to get a lockout on the final boss and kill the final boss in Mythic. Like I get that. But that being said, they absolutely suck. They kill your game for pugging, and they just make it even harder for people to engage with this highest level of content that you've provided people.
Yeah. And I don't know, like in a game that focuses on aesthetic so much, having this weird lockout ID system always just felt weird to me, and very gamey within the world of the game. You know what I mean? It's just like
Mhm.
it's just weird. I mean, obviously lockouts have existed in since the dawn of time, as you said. Like even in the games that predate this game, where content wasn't instanced, like the the bosses still had a lockout in that once you killed it, it took a certain number of days for it to respawn. And so that was kind of how they controlled that. And like I think that's just good. Like I think, well, okay. Maybe let's take a step back and say, is there a world in which that's not necessary? Like, should you just be able to kill all the bosses over and over again if you want?
I think that the game fundamentally would break down if you did that.
I
I
agree,
think
but like only because that's the way it's only been always been, right?
yeah, but I don't how do you the game has so much scaffolding built around the fact that you can't just jumpstart yourself to the best gear possible that if you did this then you would be able to. Like even in the repeatable content, it doesn't award the best gear that you can get.
True.
Like you essentially have a Mythic Plus lockout for gear, right? Like you can only get Myth gear once a week from the vault. So
Yeah, I mean
I,
this is what like people often are like, why is it two pieces of gear at the end of a Mythic Plus that I might not even get? I have a 20% chance, or I guess technically 40% chance, whatever. I have a low percentage chance each run to get something, and I could very realistically get nothing. Like, why is that? And the answer is because you could do it over and over and over again. That's why.
mhm.
Is because you could do it infinity number of times in a week if you wanted to. So any system that doesn't have a lockout or a reset is going to need to severely hamper the amount of stuff you can get from it. But again, that is in and itself like it's a progression system, but it's it's retention because they don't want you to progress to the end of the gearing path because they want you to that to be a slow deliberate process. And again, not just because they want to keep your sub, because that's like what you want as a player too. I actually do think this, that like people think they want to just get gear as fast as possible, but I
Mhm.
think you would get very bored of it very quickly. I think you would, because
Yeah,
it is
I mean if you
fun to watch your item level go up and to get better.
if you reach the end of your like progression path in a week and then you have another week of playing with that gear, after that second week, you're going to feel like what's the point of doing this anymore?
Yeah.
Outside of the people who are pushing the like absolute upper echelons of content, they like you have to set goals for yourself and eventually those goals will become unattainable. Like that's how it happens for everybody.
Hmm.
And the faster you hit that wall of becoming unattainable is the faster you burn out of the game and stop playing.
Yep.
And so I do think that this is kind of protecting people from themselves. I am one who would sit there and grind things out as fast as humanly possible if I could. So I get it. I get the frustration because it is very annoying to know that I can upgrade one piece of gear every week with the crests I'm given.
Hmm.
But at the end of the day, uh, it doesn't really make me feel so bad that I don't want to play anymore. Whereas I think that if I reached the end of my gearing after a week, all of my friends still needed gear, I would kind of feel bad after a couple weeks of doing
Yeah.
that content that doesn't really award me anything, you know?
So, okay, let me ask you a question. This game used to have a lot of retention activities that they've removed from the game now. As you said at the beginning, artifact power, daily quests, all these things that are required to you to log in every day in order to keep advancing your character have all been removed from the game. And the result is a game that is very fixed, is pretty deterministic through the crest system, doesn't need you to log in every day, and people are bored and they're
Hmm.
quitting. So, are we saying essentially that perhaps we are our own worst enemy, and these things that we hated absolutely hated were actually successfully keeping us engaged in the game for longer.
I think that that's the case for a lot of things. And I think that it's always easier to say the grass is always greener, when in reality it's not. I think that Titan forging was a colossal fuck up, and I'm glad that they realized that. I honestly think that artifact power grinds were a colossal fuck up, but not because of the artifact power, but because they took these systems which were supposed to meant to be fun, meant to be engaging, things that you could do, and they forced you into them to get this player power. I don't think that the inherent AP itself was the problem. Like if you just awarded AP from doing dungeons and doing raids and questing, I think it would have felt infinitely better. But instead, they had Torghast, they had island expeditions, and they had the ability to farm it through Mythic Plus in Legion. And I think that that is the problem. Is they gave people an avenue to essentially farm this stuff infinitely and made them interface with these new systems and things that are supposed to be fun, but it just made it feel like a chore because you had to do it to get your AP. And if you didn't do it or you didn't want to do it for a week, well, it comes down to Monday night and you're like, well, fuck, now I got to go do Torghast. And it feels bad. Right.
Mhm.
So I I don't know, man. It's hard because I want to say AP grinds were terrible because I did not have fun with them. But did I not have fun with the AP grind, or did I not have fun with the fact that they forced me into Torghast or they forced me into island expeditions? Like I don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, I think a fun question that maybe we can't answer today, but think about is that like would these grind systems be better in a game that is much closer to the game we play right now, where it is kind of trying to respect your time a little bit more, that it wants you to grind these things, but perhaps not to the absurdity levels of before. I mean, I guess if you look at it from a certain perspective, like crests are
I was about to
just
say this is just crests, isn't it?
yeah, they're just a modern version of artifact power, I guess. Like there's a certain amount you can get per week. If you want to cap per week, you have to do a certain amount of activities. So go do them. And I guess there's not a catch up mechanic, but there is an ability like you're not. I don't know. I didn't play when artifact power was a thing. So if you missed a week, could you just get 2 weeks worth the next week? Did the game allow you to do that?
Yes and no. I mean, you could farm it indefinitely. So like if you wanted to, you could go hop into an island expedition and just grind out more AP.
Yeah.
Or jump into Mythic Plus in Legion for artifacts, like you were asking, and get more. Um, it's just the amount that you needed for each level went up exponentially, right? So that was more of the hampering on it.
Yeah.
Is you would have to do, if you needed to do 20 dungeons for this level, then you needed to do 45 dungeons for the next level.
Okay.
Like it was an exponential increase in
Gotcha.
XP required.
Yeah, I think crests are just a modern like what the modern artifact power system would look like. Like I wonder if at some point in the process they called, instead of calling them crests, they called them like uh action points, and they were like, "Oh shit, we can't do that."
I just think that the realization that AP is just crest now makes me realize that I don't think I would like AP in the modern game either. Yeah, I think it would just annoy me just as much as crests are.
Yeah.
Even if it was just awarded for doing the shit that I already do, like crests are, it's still frustrating.
Well, but yeah, uh, they are for sure. But you know what isn't though, or what sort of is, but is not Valor Stones. Valor Stones. Um, this is actually a thing I'm discovering on my monk right now. I'm doing dungeons and like because I'm getting discounts on the lower crest stuff. Every dungeon I'm allowed to upgrade something, but I'm now running into a thing where I don't have enough Valor Stones to upgrade stuff because if you're just doing Mythic Plus and you're not raiding or doing any other activity, you just do not get enough Valor Stones per run to do anything. Let alone the 250 you need to create a spark in order to do
Yep.
any of that gear. Um, so we haven't talked about Valor Stones very much because we hate them, but that another problem. Like the idea of Valor Stones as they described them in the game was that this is just a thing. It's another resource, but as long as you're playing the game, you will have them. And I just don't think that's actually true.
It was in their first iteration. You had
Yeah.
more than enough,
Yep.
and now you don't have enough ever.
I still think the change of making you spend them to make the spark was just a terrible
Unneeded.
idea.
Yeah, it's completely unneeded.
Yeah.
All right, Scott. Well, I think that's all we really have for player retention. I do want to cut us a little bit short on it because I want to bring up one thing that you've asked me about today before we end off the show.
Okay.
And that was we came to the realization that we have 3 fucking months still uh until the next patch potentially. And so what Scott had asked me very blatantly, he just said, "Do you want to do Firelands?" So we might be making our classic return. Unsure yet, but we might
Okay.
be making our classic return.
So I pinged the guild to see what the reaction to that was. And I didn't get like a resoundingly excited response from people. So that might have been a little premature. It's not like people were like, "Oh fuck yeah, let's do it. We're getting the band back together." So maybe not. But I mean, I think that was like the big thing that happened. I basically I reached out to one of our friends and just said, "Hey, do you know the season's half over?" And he said to me, "Firelands," and I said, "Huh." And that's where it went from there. Um, I think that was just part of like the shocked realization of we've been playing this game for 3 months in the season, and so just do everything we've done so far again before we're gonna have new content, and that's insane.
Yeah, it's like I said earlier, it's a bit saddening to think about. But
Mhm.
all of that to say, who knows? We might be talking about classic here in the next couple weeks. One thing I did want to call out though, with the holidays coming up, Scott and I live in the US, so we do have Christmas and New Year's coming up. Um, that
Hey,
is
Tevin,
going to, yeah.
every country has New Year's.
Well, yes, but anyways, you know what I'm saying. We have holidays coming up here at the end of the year. And
A
so
lot of them have Christmas too.
I hate you so much. You know exactly what I'm going for here. We are not going to be recording. Next week is going to be our last recording for the year. So I just want to make sure everybody is aware of that. Um, but yeah, I think we'll be right back at it after New Year's,
And
most
hopefully we'll have
likely.
things to talk about.
Yeah. Let's see. New Year's is on a Wednesday, so I would say probably January 8th would be our next episode after next week's,
That sounds
if I had to
reasonable.
guess. But all of that to say is it's a holiday season. Everybody go enjoy it with friends, family, and whoever else you want to hang out with at the time. And please have a good holiday season. But my
Yeah.
question for you guys this week is when it comes to player retention systems, it's really easy for us to think of the things we hate about them. But I do want to know, is there anything that you guys remember fondly, or now you look back and with a new light, you're like, hey, maybe that wasn't so bad and we should bring that back? Because I think Scott and I went through this whole journey that you guys just went on with us, where it's like, man, we came in and we're like, were we really right last week? And then we were like, nah, we were definitely right last week. And then we were like, did we really hate AP? And then we were like, oh, that's just Crest. Yeah, we really hate AP. Yeah. So I just want to know, is there any like player retention system that you guys do like, that is either in the game now or in the past? So definitely let us know. And as always, that's yelling into the void wow at gmail.com. YouTube is at yelling into the void wow, and Twitter is at into the void wow.
And please make sure you subscribe to the podcast. You can find us on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, and pretty much anywhere else in the world. There are podcasts to be consumed. As Tevin said, we'll be taking a couple weeks off, but you don't want to miss it when we come back because I'm sure there's just going to be like there's so many things to talk about. We're going to talk about the surprising tank balance changes and the new crest system and the affix changes. Oh my god, they're going to announce it's going to like y'all Mythic Plus is saved. I'm calling it now. January 8th saved. You don't want to miss
Scott,
our
if any one of those things doesn't happen, I'm finding a new co-host.
No, but like think about the chance of if they do. You know like those like TikTok videos that were like magicians and they're like, I'm gonna guess your number, and then like they just say a number, and it's like for like 60% of the people listening, they're just like, oh, you got that wrong. But like 60% is way too low of a percentage, by the way. For most of the people listening, they're just like, oh, you got that wrong, and then they just scroll on. But look at the one person that they actually did say their number, they're like, whoa. And they're changed forever. That could be us right now. That could be us.
I
So
hope that you are wishing in all of the good things into the new year for us,
mhm.
especially around Mythic Plus and stuff. But we'll see. We'll see.
I think it's the post is going to be titled "New Year, New M Plus."
Oh yeah,
Yeah, it's going
not
to come
new
out on,
expansion, new M Plus.
and it's going to come out on January. Hold on, before I say something. Why isn't my calendar working? January 7th.
January 7th.
Yep.
All
New
right,
Year, New M Plus.
I'll hold you to that.
Yep.
We'll be recording on that day,
Uh-huh.
so
I
when
can't
they
wait.
don't have a new year new M plus, I'll make sure that you answer to why they don't have a new year new M plus.
Oh, I mean, we're not gonna have to worry about that because it's happening.
All right, guys. As always, please consider liking, subscribing, and commenting on the YouTube video. All of those help us grow, get more exposure to people. So if you enjoy what we do here, please go chat with us over at YouTube. But until next week, guys, we'll just be over here yelling into the void.